It is with great pleasure that I introduce to you today a guy who is brilliant. Well, at least that's the name of his company. Brilliant. I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Brilliant ideas. No, brilliant
Brilliant advice.
advice. That's it. I forgot it already. And you are following in the pattern of so many other brilliant folks that I've known recently or know about recently. You started life in a far-flung part of the British Empire, then moved to Canada, and then moved to the United States. I mean, what's going on with so many people taking that path? I don't know that you had much to do with the decision making, but it's interesting that you've come that same direction from New Zealand to Canada to Cincinnati to Sarasota. What a trip.
That's right. It wasn't my choice to be born on the south end of the South Island in New Zealand, but that was a great place to grow up as a kid, and I lived there until I was 10 years old. And then it wasn't my choice to move to Canada when I was 10, but I was thrilled to be moving there. It just opened up my world completely. I became excited about school and just life in general. So that was a great move for me. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm thrilled to have you, Cern Basher. I'm thrilled that you've joined us today, and we are going to take a look at my favorite subject in the entire world right now. And but I also want to let people know that Cern, you have the company is an investment advising business. That's what you do for a living, what you've done for a long time. You used to do it in a fairly big way with a bunch of employees and stuff, but now it's a boutique firm. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I may or may not look like it, but I've been in this business now for about 30 years.
Okay, all right, yes. Well, of course, you don't look a day over 29. Me
Right.
either, me either.
Exactly.
Okay, all right. Well, why don't you we're going to talk about bots. We're going to talk about robots. We're going to talk about my favorite subject. Throw up your screen, your screensaver, I mean, your slide deck, and let's see what you've come up with.
That sounds good. It's become my favorite topic lately as well. And only because I've taken the time to run some numbers, so to speak. I've had some fun with some spreadsheets. Um, this first screen is kind of a visual of the bot players potentially as we see them today. The bot in the middle, that's the biggest one, obviously, is Tesla's Optimus robot. That's the one probably most people are familiar with. And I would say of late, there are some other companies making some waves as well. Just to the left of Optimus below is the shiny Figure 01 bot. And they've made some waves lately with their announcement partnership with BMW. Um, there are also some other players in this chart as well. It's still early days. We will see how this develops. But
Yes,
I wanted to spend a little bit of time with you today and sort of discuss the economics of bots and the potential and the market size potential.
great, super.
So just here we go. So let's dive right into the numbers. And I apologize for people that don't like spreadsheets and numbers. I'll try to keep this as simple as I can. Um, in this first column, I wanted to take a look at here sort of the potential economics for the industry, or if you want to say this could be a particular company, however you want to look at this, that's fine. The biggest advantage that bots have potentially over people, once they become capable of doing work that humans can do, is their ability to work tirelessly for long hours per day, so 20 hours a day is what I've modeled here. I don't know of too many human workers that can do that.
No, Elon might be the one case, but
He might be.
he says he needs 6 hours sleep. He's found that anything less than six, he becomes less productive.
Well, so then even then the bot could outperform Elon.
Right.
Um, and I'm assuming that the bots work 350 days a year, that there's some downtime for maintenance and things like that. So the bot works about 7,000 hours a year. And compare that to 2,000 hours for a human, that's a 3.5 times advantage that the bot has.
Right.
Right. And so initially, maybe the bot can't work as fast as a human can. And so maybe that 3.5 times is not that big. But eventually, the bot may be able to work faster than a human. And that 3.5 times advantage may go to 4, 5, 6, 7
Yes.
times if the bot can work twice as fast. I'm just showing here numbers if the bot works the same speed as a human.
Right. Of course.
Okay, so initially, bots may not be that capable. And if you think about how much we pay people to do tasks, there's a certain wage rate. Obviously, there's also other costs to employers, like benefits and healthcare and taxes and insurance and all kinds of stuff.
Yes.
But if we just look at the cost per hour, initially bots may not command that much of a price because they're not that capable. But as bots become more capable, they should be able to, warrant a higher price.
Right.
But in this example, I'm showing you what happens if the price per bot hour is very low.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of looking at some point out of the future when there's a lot of bots out there, and there may in fact be a competitive marketplace. There may be lots of bot companies, in addition to the ones I showed on the first slide.
Right. Right.
So let's just say the bot only makes $5 an hour. And I'm modeling out here an industry where bots are not sold, but where they're provided as a service.
Right.
So that way companies don't have to worry about how long the bot will last. They don't have to worry about the maintenance. It's all part of the service contract. So the bot revenue per year is 35,000. And I'm assuming that the cost to make a bot is around 12,000. Scott Walter and others have made some projections here, and I've got some slides in the back here we can take a look at. But those projections are actually even lower than this potentially as bot makers scale up.
Yeah. Well, Scott
12,000.
and I did a video. I think we were the first, maybe it was, my show was the second where Scott talked about this, but Scott and I got the price down to where he thinks it's, at that time at least, thought it might be as low as 6,000 in scale.
Right. That's right. So the potential is certainly there to drive this price down as bots are made at scale. I'm assuming for this analysis that bots last about 10 years, but there'll be significant maintenance costs along the way, and obviously a lot of parts will be replaced. So I'm looking at about $5,000 a year in maintenance costs.
Mm-hmm.
So that could be replacing actuators and different things along the way. And then some other operating costs, a couple $1,000s. So the profitability per bot is about 26, 27,000 under this scenario.
Right.
And if the industry deploys 150 million of them over time,
Right.
not next year, not tomorrow,
Right.
not 2 weeks, the revenue for the industry would be $5.2, $5.3 trillion.
Right.
Okay. And the operating profit would be 4 trillion. And the net profit might be something like 3 trillion. So 150 million sounds like a lot, but consider that there's 3.5 billion workers in the world.
Right.
So let's flip over to the rightmost column. I've driven down the bot price per hour from $5 to $3 to now the bots only make $21,000 a piece. The profit's only $15,000. And at $1 billion, that's a $21 trillion revenue industry.
Right.
And the profits would be north of potentially $10 trillion.
Yeah.
So the magnitude of the potential is staggering. And that's only the billion bots.
Right.
Some
Right.
have assumed that we could have, 2, 3, 5 billion bots in the world at some point.
I think
And then you factor in space travel and space exploration. And suddenly it's unlimited in terms of the number of bots that we could eventually deploy.
Yeah,
Right.
I think Elon has suggested that it could, his estimate, and he's just pulling it out of the sky, and he admits that, but would be 2 bots per person on Earth. So we could be looking at 16 billion bots before we would really fully utilize them to the extent that they're valuable.
Right. And so let's say it's only 10 times instead of 16 times what
Right.
the numbers are here, then you're looking at 110 trillion in profit.
Right. Right.
Might I remind you that current world GDP is around 100 trillion.
Right.
So we're talking about that in profit, not just GDP.
Right.
So that's the backdrop. One of the questions that we get a lot is how many bots can be made? And the answer is we don't know yet, but we can make some guesses. So if you take a look at the world's automakers, the largest automakers make about 10 to 11 million vehicles a year. The industry makes about 70 to 80 million a year. But cars are a lot heavier than bots. It's a lot more mass to move around. You need big factories and big pieces of equipment to make cars and form them. So if you adjusted for the weight, if weight was the issue, the auto industry today could make 2.5 billion bots a year. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
Now, on the other hand, let's look at the smartphone industry. Apple sells about 200 million iPhones a year. Samsung sells 200 million plus a year. The industry makes 1.3 billion smartphones a year. It's a staggering number. But adjusting for weight there, the smartphone makers could only make 13 million bots. So there's a big difference between the auto industry and the smartphone industry in terms of their capability to make bot equivalents.
In terms of weight.
In terms of weight. And this tells me that weight actually is not the factor.
Right. Exactly.
Right? If the auto industry had demand for more vehicles, they would make more. If the smartphone industry had more demand for more phones, they would make more too.
Yes.
Right.
And the automobile industry might make 80 million vehicles per year, but they probably make 200 million automobile doors.
Correct.
So,
Right. So there's certainly pieces of the car that they make a lot more of. Yes. Good point. Now, before we leave this slide, just note the ramp that iPhone had in iPhones.
wow.
2007, 3.7 million in the first year of the introduction of the iPhone. And by 2015, they were making north of 200 million iPhones.
Yeah.
So again, for all the skeptics out there that say, you know, it's going to be hard to ramp the production into the hundreds of millions, I don't think so.
I agree 100%.
Okay. Now, again, the bot is bigger than an iPhone. I understand that, but it's also simpler in many ways. And it will take some time for the industry to ramp, but it may not be as slow as some people think it might be.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Let's take a look then and play with some numbers. These are illustrations. These are not my predictions.
Sure.
I'm just showing some different scenarios here for different pathways for bot deployments.
Mm-hmm.
And I state them fairly simply, and I'm using my judgment here. Scenario A is a slow start and a slow ramp. So for the next 3 years, we have no bot deployments. Companies are simply developing their bots, testing them in-house. Maybe they've got a few partners they're testing a few with, but they're not deploying and they're not actually selling any and getting any revenue from any customers.
Right.
I think that's a pretty slow start.
Right.
Okay. Particularly since some of the industry players have said that by 2025, they intend to start selling and deploying bots.
Right.
Okay. So I'm saying, okay, let's build in a little buffer. And then even then, I have only 100 bots being deployed in 2027,
Mm-hmm.
1,000 more in 2028, and only 10,000 more in 2029. So this industry is barely getting started by 2030.
And this would be compared, let's say, to a Model Y or a Cybertruck, where most people are predicting 75 to 100,000 the first full year.
Yeah. Right. So this is an extremely slow start and an extremely slow ramp. Now, contrast that with a slow start and a faster ramp. Again, you may quibble with the speed of the ramp,
Right.
faster or slower, that's fine. But under those two scenarios, scenario A and B, you get to bot deployments by 2040 of 140 million to 910 million bots deployed.
Right.
So the ramp matters. Now, let's go to C and D. A fast start and a slow ramp, and a fast start and a fast ramp. So looking at bots deployed this year, only 100 this year, 1,000 next year, and so on, and then growing. And then the column D, the fast start, fast ramp, it's a little bit faster growth. So in those scenarios, you get 316 million bots deployed in column C and 1.2 billion bots deployed by 2040. So these are 4 different scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Again, there's an infinite number of possibilities, and these are only 4 of them. but I think they can be instructive on many levels. So let's just explore this. For those that like graphs, here's the graph of those previous numbers.
Okay.
This is a graph of annual bot deployments, and you can see there's not a whole lot going on here in the early years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so some people in 2028 may sit around and say, remember those guys on YouTube talking about humanoid bots, how excited they were? What's happened with that? We haven't seen anything going on there. Well, just wait a little bit. It's coming. So that's the annual deployments. And then here's the total number over time.
Okay.
So I think we could say these are 4 very different scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay. Now, this is a chart that shows the same 4 scenarios, but looking at industry market value for either the entire industry, or if you're just focused on Tesla, you could say, okay, if Tesla's doing this, then this is the value for Tesla for just bots.
Right.
Okay, and I'll get to in a second how I calculate these numbers, but what I want to show here is in some ways, it doesn't really matter whether it's a fast or slow start or a fast or slow ramp. By 2040, the industry value is between 266 trillion
Yeah.
to 460 trillion. So, you know, for me, it doesn't matter whether it's
right.
200 or 400 trillion.
Yeah.
This would be the biggest industry on the planet by far.
Right.
If these numbers are anywhere near correct, even if it's 10% of these numbers, the opportunity is staggering.
Right.
Now, obviously the difference, it matters in the early years, 2030, almost $1 trillion market cap for the industry versus 150 trillion.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly the ramp matters and the speed of the start matters in that situation. But my point is, ultimately, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. As long as the industry is making progress and developing bots and then starting to deploy them at some point, they will get there.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And folks like Scott Wolter help us understand those improvements, right?
Right.
All right. Let's just dive into one of the scenarios a little deeper just so people can understand how I'm calculating all these numbers. You've already seen the bots deployed column. That was the first table I showed.
Right.
I am assuming that initially the bots make about $20 an hour.
Okay.
Because they're pretty scarce and they're still useful at $20 an hour, and that makes sense to pay them. But as you scale up production and as competition arrives, maybe the price per hour comes down. And I have it coming down to $9 an hour by 2040 in this scenario. It's 55% reduction in the labor cost of a bot.
Okay.
Okay, talk about deflationary.
Right.
Okay, but the industry revenue goes from 0 to 8.8 trillion. I'm assuming 50% net margins, which by some people's calculations actually is pretty conservative. That's 4.4 trillion in profit. And then you apply a PE to get to the market value. And I'm assuming that the PE starts out really high and over time comes down to a more reasonable number. And in this slow start, slow ramp scenario, there's still a lot of growth to go. So the PE actually is still pretty high in 2040, 60.
Right.
Okay. Now, contrast that with scenario B. I've got the PE ratio coming down even more at that point because more of the opportunity has been realized.
Right.
Potentially. Right. At this point, you've got almost 1 billion bots deployed.
Right.
And depending on what the ultimate market size is, we might be well on our way to, saturation. Although to your earlier point, if there's 16 billion bots in the world, then we're still scratching the surface. But here I've got the hourly rate going from $20 an hour down to $4.
Right.
An 80% reduction in the cost of the bot, an 82% reduction in the PE ratio. So actually in this scenario, the market value peaks before 2040. Because even though the industry is growing rapidly, the combination of the lower bot price per hour and the lower PE brings the market value down.
Yeah, and let me also just remind people again to pay attention to the word deployment. This is not bots produced in that year. This is cumulative deployments assuming a 10-year life. So as each year, let's say that Tesla only builds 10,000 next year and deploys 10,000 in 2025. In 2026, if they deploy another 10,000, they're still getting paid for the first 10,000. So now the revenue stream is on 20,000, not just on the new 10,000. And that's something that I think a lot of people miss in terms of what this, assuming again that they are leased or rented, not sold. And I think certainly for at least the first few years, it would be ridiculously dumb to sell them for a whole list of reasons. But certainly in terms of the makers, the money is going to be in leasing these.
I agree with you, and thank you for pointing that out. And I would also add that in this simple illustration, I've assumed that bot production actually is a net production.
Okay.
In 10 years, as those early bots, go to the scrap heap, that the production number is a net number,
right?
Adjusting for that. So that's another point. Again, these are just illustrations. They're not predictions in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
Here's the fast start, slow ramp. You get to a bigger market cap for the industry more quickly. I still have, again, the price per bought hour coming down significantly and the PE ratio contracting as well. As the industry matures, the valuation multiple will come down. Okay. And then lastly, sorry for all these tables, but just to be complete, here's the last one. Because this grows so quickly, the market value for the industry peaks before 2040.
Okay.
As the PE multiple really contracts over that time.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
Okay. So these are some numbers for folks to take a look at, to think about. My conclusion was it doesn't really matter too much from a market value standpoint how quickly bots are deployed and how quickly the ramp is. Yeah, there's still a significant difference between these four scenarios, but from a market value standpoint, the market will assign a higher PE to even a small business because they can see the potential.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I think in the shorter term analysis also, I just did a video the other day talking about what I call my 2026 analysis. And the numbers on the bots are so massive that even if Tesla only deploys 100,000 in 2026, which I think would be a ridiculously low number, if the net profit per bot is only $50,000 a year, you're talking about a $5 billion profit in that year, plus the previous year, if there's any that have been released, and then the next year that doubles if they only deploy another 100,000. If they deploy 1 million, you're talking about a $50 billion profit just on the bots, and it becomes such a big number so fast that, to your point, it doesn't really matter too much whether it's $50,000 a year or 40,000 a year, or whether in terms of dollars, and it doesn't matter too much whether it's 100,000 or 1 million, because the numbers are just huge.
that's right. The one thing that we get pushback on, because the numbers are so huge, is the comment that, oh, global GDP is 100 trillion. You're talking about 4 or 5x that? You're nuts. Well, here's why that's a terrible argument. Because labor today, it's not part of the stock market.
Right.
No one's applying a PE multiple to my income.
Right.
And valuing Cern Basher at X multiple, right? If they did, then labor would be the biggest part of the stock market globally, because everybody's labor would be capitalized in that way.
Right.
So what we're talking about here is changing the nature of labor from something that's not part of the financial system, not part of the stock market, into something that has a PE ratio attached to it that now suddenly has a bigger economic value on a stock exchange.
The other reason why that argument doesn't make sense, and I think you might be getting into this on your next couple of slides, or maybe it's coming up later, is that the labor is commonly the factor that keeps a product from being possible, or keeps a service from being possible, or labor can almost always be the reason why somebody can't afford a product, even though the product exists, somebody can't afford it because it's too expensive for them. But as the labor cost drops radically, all of a sudden wealth increases radically and people are able to afford way more of everything.
That's right. And I would extend that to say, whenever you drop the cost of something, those savings then filter out to the rest of the economy,
Right.
right? So if it costs people less to buy a car, they may take that savings and buy a whole bunch of other goods.
Right. This is the
So,
oil effect. So
yes,
the price of oil drops, people have more gasoline, people have more money to spend on other things. Yes.
that's right. So the combination of bots, AI in general, and then autonomous transportation, where you may get to the point where people decide they don't need to own their own vehicles anymore. They just use transportation as a service.
Yep.
Just like this is labor as a service. It frees up so much capital in the system to allow people to do other things with it. I can easily see an economic boom because of these trends playing out.
And just to give an example of that, I have decided to sell my vehicle and not buy another one. And it's not because I'm so old I can't drive anymore. It's because I work from home. I figured out what my cost of Ubering would be each month for the few times when I wouldn't be able to use my wife's Model Y. Um,
Mhm.
we aren't going together. I figured out what that would be per month, and it doesn't make any sense at all for me to continue to own a vehicle.
That's right. And then as autonomous vehicles come along, that cost of the Uber trip now is drastically reduced because it'll be even cheaper. Yeah. Um, this is the what it looks like in terms of visually for the four scenarios, the market cap pathways.
Okay.
And so again, it might be a little confusing for some people to see this go up and then come down. It's simply because the PE ratio that I'm using for the industry will over time come down as the
Right.
industry matures,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Now, whether or not it's 2034 or whatever, who knows? You know, the industry may have way more capacity than 1.2 billion bots, as we previously discussed. So in that case, the PE won't contract as quickly. But the interesting thing is you kind of start to see a convergence in 2040.
Mm-hmm.
So whether the start was slow or whether the ramp was slow, it starts to get to the point that doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of investors may say, well, my time horizon is not 2040, my time horizon is more like 2030. In
Mm-hmm.
that case, it matters.
Right.
But if you look long term, if you've got a 2-decade time horizon, then this isn't going to matter too much. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So this was interesting. ARK Invest put out their big ideas 2024. And, you know, I showed you earlier that the cost of labor coming down, 60, 70, 80%. This slide here on the top right from ARK Invest was kind of interesting. The time to do laundry when people started to use washing machines dropped, 80, 90%. The time to manufacture a car because of this assembly line, that was a new technology. It dropped 80, 90%. The time that Amazon took to ship from when somebody created an order with the advent of the technology in their warehouses has
Yes.
dropped 80%. So I'm also then saying that the cost of labor from deploying bots will cause labor to drop 70, 80, 90% over time.
Right. Right.
Okay, so that's why I'm using such low numbers for the bot cost. Now, offsetting that in the short term, in the near term, as bots become more capable, the value of the bot actually increases because they can then do the labor of somebody who makes $15 an hour or $30 an hour. And so for a company, the cost savings are just enormous. And therefore, the bot maker can get a higher price to offer that to those companies. But here in this analysis, I'm looking purely long term and saying the cost will come down over time because of likely competition.
Yeah.
Okay. The other interesting thing about Amazon is on this lower left chart, the purple bars show the number of bots robots in their warehouses. Now, they're not humanoid bots. They're just bots on wheels that move things around.
Mhm.
But still, uh, it shows you that Amazon may well become the first big company to have more bots than employees at some point in the next couple of years.
Right. And another thing I always like to point out to people is that this is not new. This is not, this is, I mean, the idea of a humanoid robot is new, and the impact that it's going to have is far greater than anything we've ever seen before. But automation has been happening since the dawn, almost the dawn of time. We go back, the first automation was some kind of a clock that predates Christ, okay? And it was an automated time device. So
Mhm.
we've been automating for a very, very long time. The loom was a huge increase in capabilities for human workers to produce fabrics. Um, this is not new. It's just going to be times multiple in terms of the impact.
That's right. That's right. This is definitely a step change. Um, One of the other challenges that people talk about is say, well, okay, how are people going to deal with this? They're going to be displaced. And while that ultimately is likely true, and it won't just come from humanoid robots, which is simply AI embodied, it's going to come from AI in general, whether it's embodied or not. But the good news is this, that in the short term, the near term, we have a massive global labor shortage. And by some estimates here, Korn Ferry has a report that they think by 2030 that there could be a shortage of 85 million jobs uh, could go unfilled because there are not enough skilled people to take them. And so bots can help us fill those roles,
Right.
right? Companies are finding it increasingly challenging to find the workers that they need. And so also from a demographic standpoint, there's a note down here about Japan that they might face a shortage of 11 million workers by 2040. So bots can help fill those, fill those gaps. And that would be a positive thing for everybody.
Yes. In the United States, we have been able to avoid the consequences of this because of the massive amount of importation of labor, if you want to call it that. The immigration is working to reduce our problem, but the truth is, but for immigration, we would have a declining population in the United States already, and we already have labor shortages. So imagine if we didn't have all this immigration, our labor shortages would already be massive and very troubling for the economy.
That's right. Certainly, uncontrolled immigration brings about other challenges, but yes,
Yes,
you're
yes.
from a labor standpoint. Yep, agreed. The other thing too is, there are a lot of jobs that are dangerous and deadly. And frankly, I think that humanity should be working to eliminate those jobs, right? And so just in the United States in 2022, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 5,500 people died because of work-related injuries. 2.8 million people were injured or got sick because of work-related things. Globally, it's on a scale, it's massive. Almost 400 million people sustained non-fatal work injuries. Um, there were 2.6 million deaths and 330,000 accidents that resulted in death. So it's not such a bad idea to try to figure out ways of making work safer for people,
Right.
right? I don't know about you, but I don't really want to go to a job every day where I could potentially die,
Yes.
right? That just doesn't seem like a good idea. So bots again can be very useful in many ways. And so, there's a lot of good reasons to have bots, but the truth is ultimately, as these bots become more and more skilled, they will take jobs away from even, jobs that people think are good jobs, well-paying jobs, and so on. And the principal reason is that they just have this advantage that they can work 7,000 hours a year and humans can't even come close.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so to touch on the advantages of bots, it's not just economic savings that we're talking about. It's not just lower cost per hour. It's at so many other levels as well. And this is a list I put together. It's not complete, but it's a pretty good one. Bots are never late for work. They never get sick. They're kind of pandemic proof. So if another pandemic happens again, if you had a factory with bots in it, they could keep running, right? We couldn't do that during the pandemic, or few factories could. They got special permission to do so. Bots never quit, so you don't have the massive turnover costs that some companies have. Walmart, for example, has about 40% turnover. They have 2.3 million employees worldwide. They have to hire about 1 million people a year just to keep their employment where it is. What a massive cost that must be to Walmart. Billions of dollars. So anyway, the list goes on. We can discuss some of these in detail if you'd like, but these points kind of speak for themselves. There's savings in every nook and cranny of a business, from HR to legal to the cost of maintaining bathrooms and food service and different things like that, parking spaces for employees. It's just savings across the board.
Yeah, and I did a video on this. We great minds think alike, brilliant minds, I suppose, in your case. Anyway, we had I did a video on this a couple of weeks ago. My list was not as long as yours. I did add one that I don't see you have here, so you might want to add this to your list. Consistency of performance at a level which allows a line to not be have problems with a fast worker versus a slow worker. You also have a consistency of performance, which helps in terms of your supply chain within your factory, getting supply to a location just on time, etc. So I actually added up. It was not scientific in any way, shape, or form, but people commonly look at the savings as being the number of dollars an hour you pay an employee, let's say $20 an hour, plus the 35% overhead that people talk about in terms of Social Security, et cetera. And they come up with the number, say $27 an hour. I decided, based on your list, this kind of list is probably double that in actual money savings, supervisors, HR, et cetera.
That's right. And also when you factor in that a lot of companies have to deal with fraud and theft from their employees.
Yes.
Apparently, according to some numbers I saw, in the United States, there's about $400 billion a year lost to employees that get paid for time they didn't work.
Right, right. And another one that was really interesting to me, because I did run three shifts and sometimes 4 shifts in my plastics manufacturing business, is that a lot of companies are afraid to go to a second shift, certainly afraid to go to a third shift, because those second and third shifts are not as efficient, more inclined to theft or mistakes or broken equipment, et cetera. But if you're dealing with bots, those kind of fears would go away, and a lot of companies would double their basic they would have their cost of overhead per unit of production just by going to a second shift. They would make it in 1/3. If they go a third shift, then they would be down to 25% if they could do 4 shifts. So this would be a massive savings.
The other big thing that's not on here, and it should be as well, is that this will allow us to regain more security in the production of things that are critical to our country. So think back to the pandemic.
Yeah.
We ran out of protective equipment for healthcare workers.
Yeah.
We were flying airplanes to China to get them filled up with masks and stuff and to fly them back to deliver to hospitals urgently. I can't imagine how much money we spent doing that. So bots would allow us to make everything that we need that's important to our nation.
Right.
Not just from a military perspective, but just from a security perspective, security of the food supply, security of the drug supply in this country, security of whatever you want to call it. That's another very important aspect as well. It makes us less reliant perhaps on some countries that, when push comes to shove, may not treat us as well as we would like them to.
Right. So onshoring of manufacturing, we are already seeing this because of 3D printing. We're already seeing this because of some other automation and AI, but adding the robots would make onshoring much more likely. That's, I guess, the right word.
That's right. Yeah, the idea of comparative advantage really gets upended a little bit with bots and the labor advantages that bots bring. Yeah. So just then to your point about the cost, and these numbers may well be understated because I have not factored in the actual cost savings from all the items on the previous page. This is just the wage and the benefits. And my bot cost numbers here actually factor in some additional costs. For example, the cost of human bot minders.
Right.
I'm assuming that bots don't just come out of the box and operate autonomously. You actually have to hire people to oversee them and manage them. And so I've built that into my numbers here. But my numbers tell me that if a bot can do $15 an hour work, and again, I'm using the wage rate as a proxy for the bot's capability.
Right.
It's not perfect. Not all $15 an hour work's the same skill level, but just as a proxy, $15 an hour, the bot's savings is about $15 an hour. So you can use the wage rate as a good estimate for how much you will save by deploying
Interesting. Interesting.
But to your point, it's probably higher than this because I'm not factoring in all those other items on the previous page.
And is this only for one shift?
No, this is per hour. So the bot is working, the 7,000 hours
Okay.
a year.
Right. Okay.
Right. So this is looking at kind of on an annual basis on a bot versus a person. Yep. Sorry, it's looking at on an hourly basis. So the bot cost per hour versus human labor per hour.
But the hourly cost is derived from working basically 4 shifts.
Correct.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, but I'm assuming that the bot supplier, the bot maker, is charging the companies on an
By
hourly.
the hour. I see.
Yeah. Now, there's some different models for that. Maybe it's they charge, for the first 16 hours is a certain rate. And if you want to use the bot beyond that, maybe there's a savings. There's either a lesser rate or no additional charge. There's different creative ways maybe of structuring that. But in general, I just said, okay, here's the hourly rate. However long the bot runs is your cost.
Right.
The other consideration there is the more bots are used, then the more higher the maintenance costs are going to be. So the bot maker needs to be careful about the pricing,
right,
to make sure that they've got the maintenance costs covered. But this chart shows that the savings is enormous, and particularly at the higher wage rates.
Right.
It creates an economic incentive like you've never seen before for companies to figure out ways to use bots in their operations. This is too good to pass up for any company. What I have speculated is that once companies understand this opportunity, that they better get in front of the line vis-a-vis their competition, because if they don't, they're going to be waiting for years to get the supply of bots they need. All the while, their competition is moving away from them because the bots are saving them serious amounts of money.
Right.
And this chart shows what it could be over the lifetime of a bot. Again, assuming a bot lasts 10 years.
Right.
At $15 an hour, by deploying bots versus humans, you could save $615,000. Now, I'm assuming here that the bot maker keeps half of that savings. That's their value.
Right.
That the company gets to save then, over $300,000.
Oh.
Plus the savings from the other items on the table that we talked about.
Right.
That's not built into here. That the savings and legal cost and HR and all the other stuff is not part of this calculation.
Right.
So to your point, the numbers are probably a lot bigger than this. So for all those people,
and by the way, that's my most exciting part.
Yes.
When I went from having 100 employees to having no employees, my thrill was not in losing the employees. My thrill was in losing HR, legal,
Right.
and all of the hassles from the state of California with regard to those employees.
I don't know of many CEOs that are excited to expand those parts of their company. Yeah. So the other point with this chart is, for the people out there that want a bot that costs, only 20,000, that's not coming anytime soon.
No.
These bots are far too valuable in a manufacturing, in a factory, in a warehouse setting to be selling them to people for such a small amount of money.
Yeah.
And frankly, from a humanity perspective, we want these bots deployed at their highest use possible
Hmm.
because the savings to everybody filters through the economy and it helps everybody out.
So Cern, you're making me sad though, because those who watch this channel know I only want the bot to give me those shoulder rubs. And so you're saying it's going to be a long time before I can get that bot.
Well, if you're willing to pay up for it, absolutely. No, no problem. I won't stop anybody from selling you that bot, but I'm telling you it's going to be expensive for a while. Yeah. Um, I think we all want bots for different purposes, right?
Right.
Do stuff around the house, tremendous. It'd be great, but I think it's going to be a little while. We're going to have to make billions of them before I think that really becomes
A household item. Yes.
household item, in my opinion, because they're just too useful in the manufacturing setting. This is what it looks like for a bot maker. Call it Tesla, call it Figure, call it anybody else. If they're making bots at scale, the profit potential per bot is enormous. So think about Tesla and how much money it makes per car sold,
Yep.
right? That's
10,000, let's call it.
sorry.
Call it 10,000. A lot of people
Okay.
use that as kind of a number. It's not always 10,000, but let's call it 10,000
Yep. And that's the value that they make, the profit they make on selling one car.
one time.
That's not per year, one time. This is if the bot is doing work that somebody gets paid $7.50 an hour, minimum wage gets paid, the bot maker can make $10,000 a year for 10 years.
Right.
So the bot, if you kept your car 10 years, the bot then is 10 times as profitable as a car.
Right.
So it results in profit margins that are kind of silly. In this scenario, 60 to 73%. This is why this industry will be highly valued and could become a very large industry very quickly if it truly is this profitable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now it remains to be seen what the business models look like, but this is kind of the best guess that I and others have come up with so far.
Right.
Again, we're in early days. None of this is in stone. We're just playing with some numbers on a spreadsheet at this point.
Yep. Yep.
But it's very intriguing, very exciting to see the potential that this industry could have. And it's not only profitable per bot, it's the magnitude, it's the scale of this opportunity that we've never seen before.
Right. And the remaining issue, of course, is when does this kind of thing become possible? Are we almost there? Are the bots going to be deployable next year? And that, I think that's really the only remaining question. We saw a video this morning. I don't know if you had a chance to see it. I think the company was called 1X. And they were showing a wheeled bot. I'm calling it a centaur because it's half human and half not. But this was a wheeled bot, and it had it in multiple stations doing multiple tasks. It had at least a dozen or 2 dozen bots moving around doing these various tasks. I think that's the shot we need to see from Tesla in order to wake up the investment community that this is real.
That's right. And there will be applications for that bot, even though it can't go everywhere.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. There's plenty of opportunity. There are plenty of locations where that bot can add value. And that's what the idea of that video, I think, was trying to show, all the different things those bots were doing.
Yes.
Scott
Right.
Walter has talked about this at length in terms of what is useful work.
Yes.
And the bar actually is very low for determining what is useful work. It's moving things from point A to point B and doing that consistently and reliably over and over and over again. And humans are terrible at that.
My shoulder rub bot might just be a stand that sits behind my chair right here, and it's just the arms. I don't need the rest of the bot. I don't need a head. I just need the arms because I want to be able to say no lower, no higher, no deeper, a little harder, please. If that doesn't need the entire body in order to accomplish it. So there's lots of those kind of opportunities as well.
That's right.
All right, Cern. Well, I knew that this was going to be fascinating because you've kind of brought together and put it in charts and graphs and things to make it more visually interesting. A lot of the concepts and thoughts that we've been talking about all year. But I think it's time. You've come along with this at exactly the right time where people need to see it really thoroughly explained financially in terms of what the investment really looks like. And it's just a matter of which day, in my opinion. I don't know what I'm talking about. You're the financial advisor, but after having watched the stock market for almost 60 years now, since I was in early undergraduate school, I started watching the markets. And I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen an opportunity that's remotely similar to Tesla in general, but the bot opportunity is just off the charts.
Yeah, this is not financial advice, of course,
Of
but
course not.
I think we are witnessing the birth of what will become the world's biggest industry. And it's really pretty basic thinking in terms of you've got 3.5 billion people working. Those people are not part of any stock exchange anywhere in the world.
Right.
They're not part of any companies. The companies don't own those people. There's no PE ratio assigned to the earnings of those people.
Right.
You start bringing that into the corporate environment and bots becoming the labor force, the opportunity then becomes enormous because you're then taking a PE to those earnings
You
and
you have
capitalizing that.
you have a perfect analogy. You have a perfect analogy to that right now. You have companies who are replacing human intellectual capability. They're able to do the job faster and they're able to do the job cheaper. And so you have people being laid off from
Yes.
jobs who had no capital value in terms of the market, and it's being replaced by a Microsoft or an AI, Chat GPT, et cetera. It's being replaced by these products and companies where the PE is now the top 6 companies, 7 companies in the world in terms of total market cap. So now do that with labor in addition to intellectual capability.
That's right. And it also helps maybe people understand why we're seeing an explosion in stock prices for some of these companies, because they're taking something that was never on their balance sheet before, adding it to their balance sheet, and now they get to capitalize that and apply a P multiple to those earnings, savings, whatever you want to call it. So the same thing will happen with humanoid bots. And the great thing about it is this is not just an opportunity for Tesla, Figure, and the rest of the bot industry. It's an opportunity for Walmart, for Target, for Kroger, for UPS, for FedEx, for Coca-Cola, for all these companies that deploy bots to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
They get to capitalize their labor costs. And maybe that's not the right term exactly, but they get to apply a PE multiple to those labor costs and now get a valuation based on that.
Right.
When companies wake up to this opportunity, I think we're going to truly see an explosion in this industry in terms of interest and development.
Yeah.
Um,
We're already seeing it. I think
we
it's
already are.
beginning. We're starting to look like the 90s with regard to bots, with the way we were in the 90s with regard to the internet. It's just going to be, I can remember in 1992, 1993, reading all the articles about the internet coming. And my partner and I were already scheming about what our website was going to look like. And we had one of the first websites when the internet went live because we were ahead of it. We were thinking about the future. Well, I think we're at that stage right now with regard to bots, humanoid bots. And I think it's just a matter of time before the rest of the folks catch up.
One of the big things to watch out for is not only further developments by Tesla and Figure and others, and those are coming fast and furious these days. 1X yesterday, is the entry into this market by other big players.
Yeah.
So we've heard that potentially Microsoft and OpenAI are going to invest in Figure. That's great. That's the first step.
Yep.
But this will truly wake up people when Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft directly announced that they have a humanoid bot project,
Right.
right? And I have speculated that they should, because if you're going to create the world's biggest market, then the world's biggest companies better be players. And maybe it's NVIDIA, maybe it's not, you know, who knows who it's going to be, but
Right.
we are going to see other companies, other big companies besides Tesla enter this market at some point.
Absolutely. Yep.
It's
Yep.
too big to ignore.
It's true. It's true. Cern, thank you so much for coming on and talking about my favorite subject. I know it's now you said it's your favorite subject too. And we will definitely be having you back on this channel in the future. Look forward to more from Cern Basher as we go forward. And again, thank you so much for being on. And to all of you out there, it has been great talking to you.